Because we're at this time this time.
I guess there's.
Hi.
There you go. Hi. This is adorable. Wonder why that's here.
It looks like my house.
Yeah. You saw this?
Oh, no, somebody.
Ah,
Yeah, that's the history.
oh, you want me? No, that, okay, great.
Unless you want to make a couple.
Oh.
Comments.
But you gotta put the sock on.
Say that.
Oh. What's that?
This is not a tree.
It's not.
No.
That was our most important part.
Yeah.
What the heck is it?
So it is a key.
I always thought it was a thumb, like hitchhiking. Yeah, like doing this. Yeah. But it's a P with hills.
Oh, sorry, one of the others. Okay. It's on Zoom. I see him, I just don't see him on screen. I don't hear him. All right, John, I don't know if you can hear me. I can see that you're on the Zoom. Well, there you go.
Can you hear me, Eric?
I just wanted to make sure I actually got you. I know they don't do meetings inside the meeting.
It's very quiet. I can barely hear you.
I keep forgetting. I gotta turn on mics, and that's the other thing I gotta do in this room. I gotta turn on mics for you to hear us.
There it is. I hear you better now.
Is it just you, or is David joining us?
It'll just be me.
Okay. Oh, I already pulled it up. Oh, on a side note, John, since we haven't started yet, we got most of the single audit stuff pulled. Anne wasn't here most of the day, so I just need her to get some of the other stuff that you were asking about.
Great.
And then
And that request list is comprehensive. So once we get those things, we'll be able to get the single audit wrapped up. It should be pretty quick.
One more minute.
How are you, John?
How you doing, Ann? I'm good.
See you. Excuse me?
From my understanding, everyone said, yeah, I mean, it said yes.
Yeah, the only person we were iffy on was you.
Yes.
And we're glad you're here.
5:30, I'm gonna start the recording.
Good evening. My name is Paul Maxwell. I'm the chair of the Measure K Oversight Committee, and I'm convening the March 4th, 2025 meeting of the committee. And the first item on the agenda is the roll call. Staff, could you do that, please?
Sure. Paul Maxwell,
Present.
Gary Hook,
Present.
John Pollock,
Present.
Ashley Carrillo. Not present. Evan Daly,
Here.
Debbie Baker,
Present.
and then staff is Ann James and myself and Eric Chow.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Moving on to item 3, which is public comment. Members of the public can comment on any item not on the agenda. And not seeing any members of the public here, I assume there aren't any comments. So we can move on to item 4, which is to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was November the 13th, 2024. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes, and do you have any comments thereon?
Paul, I just had one that
Yes.
was, I think, just a kind of a typo kind of a thing. In the second, in the kind of the middle of the second full paragraph, there's a sentence that begins, expenditures were approximately 6.5 million and under the budget of 7.2 million due to the less library maintenance as the facility is still relatively period. I think the word that was intended there is new
So too.
or something along those lines, but there's just a word that's missing there.
I think you're right.
I'm sorry.
No, they just might add the sentence is incomplete.
Yes. I had one
go ahead.
further comment on the 4th paragraph where it said committee member Carrillo asked what was the estimated payback on the solar panels. And Director James will let committee member Carrillo know or address at the next meeting. Is that going to be addressed, or did you speak with her already? Or-
No, I can. So we're all aware that the solar panels came last at the library. They were not part of the original design.
Right.
The Tesla panels that we went with do not have a battery backup at the library. It's a direct payback. You know, we sell energy back to PG&E. So the library bill is approximately between $6,500 and $7,500 a month, and we get approximately $1,500 to $1,800 back from PG&E.
But the cost to install the panels was,
Almost $400,000,
so the payback is
about
Right
22
around.
years,
how many years?
22.
22. So, and did you let committee member Carrillo and Ashley know about that or not? Had you responded?
No, I thought we were going to address it at this
Yeah,
meeting.
that's
I
fine.
haven't.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. So there we go. We've responded to that.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the minutes from
Well-
anyone?
Will they last that long, the solar panels? 22 years?
Well, we expect them to.
Yeah, okay.
That's the hope.
All right, I hear a motion to.
Motion to approve as amended with the word new after.
Okay,
Second.
moved by John, seconded by Evan. I do everybody in favor? Say aye. Anyone opposed? No, okay, so the minutes of our last meeting are approved. Thank you. And then the next item is item 5, which is the presentation of the independent auditor's report for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024 for the Measure K fund. Eric, are you going to kick that off?
Yes. So good evening to the chair and the committee. So in front of you is Macias, Nini, and O'Connell's audit report for Measure K. They do an audit of the revenues and expenditures as well. As testing, you'll note that in page 1 of their audit report, it basically gives a clean opinion, which is the highest assurance that we provided the these, I want to say basic financials, but they're not basic financials, that Measure K fund itself was presented fairly. We have John Waller from MGO on Zoom, and he'll talk to you in a minute. Again, very similar to what we presented to you back in November of 2024 with the preliminary data. The information is consistent with the revenues and expenditures that we provided to you then, with about $5.6 million in revenue. Obviously, mainly it's from the Measure K sales tax, level of about $3.1 million in operating expenditures, from capital expenditures to operations of the library to debt service, and then transfers out about $3.4 million in total. Again, most of those transfers out are for the programs and projects like streets and roads, ped bike and storm drain, and the ending balance with about $3.7 million. The only difference that I think I'll just point out was the difference between capital outlay and the library maintenance. There's a difference of about $11,000 if you were to look at the detailed report that I provided you last November. The difference is MGO believes, so what we have to pay for every year is the book return machine. There's a capital lease that we have to actually pay the county for that book return machine. And it's $11,000. I had it under operations because it's not part of constructing the library. The auditors reclassified that to capital. That's really the only difference between what you saw last November and now, is that reclassification of that $11,000 for the book return machine. That's the end of my presentation. I'll hand it off to John for his comments, and you can feel free to ask any questions that you would like afterwards.
All right, thanks, Eric. Good evening, everybody. My name is John Waller. I'm the senior manager here at MGO, which is the city's external financial statement auditor. I'm here to present the city's Measure K audit results for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024, the year that was under audit. We're engaged by the city to perform an audit of these financial statements, and these financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States, or US GAAP. The purpose of our audit is to provide reasonable assurance that these amounts and the information presented is free from material misstatement. And our audit is also, during our audit, we apply the applicable accounting and auditing standards. And those auditing standards include both generally accepted auditing standards, which is GAS, and government auditing standards, which is GAGAS. I'm happy to report, as Eric mentioned, that we completed our audit and have an unmodified opinion on these financial statements. That is the highest level of assurance that can be provided, and it constitutes a clean opinion on the financials. The audit opinion can be found on page 1 of the Measure K report. You'll note in our opinion, we have included an emphasis of a matter paragraph within that opinion, and that discusses the fact that these financial statements do not purport to present fairly the financial position of the city as a whole. So Eric mentioned, obviously, the Measure K is just a few funds within the general fund of the city. So these financial statements do not present the entire city's financial position. You will also see in this financial or this audit report the detailed responsibilities of both MGO as the auditor and the city's responsibilities and city management responsibilities for the audit. You'll also find the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters performed under government auditing standards. That's on page 9 of the report. It's important to note that we consider internal control of the city as a basis for designing the audit procedures that are appropriate for expressing our opinion, and that does not mean that we do not provide an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control or on compliance. So the work we do under that is just to present and to formulate our audit procedures to perform the audit, not to opine on the internal control itself. Eric went over a little bit of the actual activities that went on during the year and how they matched your expectations. Overall, we look a lot at expenditures. We test the expenditures and we do tests of details and tying out to the supports to make sure they are compliant with the Measure K ballot language and are within GAAP, US GAAP. And then for the footnotes, you'll note the transfers footnote is probably the most meaty one there that has the most information. And for those transfers where funds are transferred out of the Measure K fund into other city funds for use, we tie those activities to city budgets and budget amendments approved by city council, and we verify that any unspent amounts are also matching to the city's financial records. So overall, it was a very successful year as an audit. It was a clean audit. We'd like to thank Eric and Ross and the rest of the finance team for helping us during our audit process. And that was really all my remarks. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, John and Eric. Do we have questions for the auditors from anyone? Debbie, go ahead.
Yes, I just, if you could give me a little more education, if you will, when you say you don't express an opinion on the effectiveness of the city's internal control. What does that mean exactly?
Right. So this audit is not an audit of internal control. That's only really required for public companies and other types of audits. So for our purposes, we look at the internal control, we assess internal control. It is looked at as a basis for designing our audit procedures. So the city's internal controls are very good. So therefore, we can rely on those controls to reduce the amount of substantive tests we do. But that's the extent of what we look at. We don't opine on the internal control as far as effectiveness. We're just opining on the fair presentation of the numbers themselves.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to understand that better.
Other questions for John or Eric?
Evan,
Go ahead.
probably a silly question. Under note 4, Eric was talking about $11,000 that you guys had a difference of opinion and where it goes. It just happened to be there's $11,000 listed as a vehicle replacement fund, library maintenance vehicle. Was that relabeled? Is that the same thing or that's totally different?
That's completely different. What that was we bought and probably answers better than me. We bought a work vehicle for the library. There's still $11,000 remaining. So that's different than the $11,000 where they reclassed the feeding machine or the book return machine.
That's your question?
Yes, thank you.
Other questions? John, I had one question on page 6, where you show the transfer to the gas tax fund and NPDS fund. Did I hear you say that you also verified the numbers here that are the total amount unspent as of June 2024?
Correct, because that can be rolling.
That's the amount of money that exists in those funds at the end of the fiscal year.
That's correct. Yep. And we match that to city records to make sure that those amounts are there, and also previous audits, because we've been the auditor for a number of years. We can see when those amounts were transferred as well. So those are all validated.
Okay. Any other questions? Seems very clear. For those of us who are not financial auditors. So we just need to accept this. So, yes. So thank you for the presentation. I hopefully will see you again next year, I hope. So thank you for that report. And we can move on to item 6.
Do we need a motion, Eric, to?
Do we need a motion to accept?
It'd be easier just to have a motion. And just to
Okay, we
accept
have
the
a
report.
motion then to accept the auditor's report for the Measure K funds for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed, anyone? No, okay, thank you very much. So we've accepted that.
before we move on to the next item, as I thought
Sorry, I know that there is none, but a public comment before we can move on. I know there probably is no public comment for that item. Just
No
in-
public, any public comment? I don't think so. Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I thought I saw, now I've forgotten where I saw this reference, but the audit report will be submitted to the city council in April. Do I understand that correct?
What normally happens is the chair, which is on your agenda later tonight, will make a presentation to the city council where he would provide a summary as well as what the subcommittee did. The city council actually already accepted that the Measure K audit report you see before you. They didn't go into it in detail back in February because what we basically do is John presents the annual comprehensive financial report, which is the citywide financial report, which includes the Measure K as well as any management comments that they have. We provided that to council, but there's another opportunity for this committee or the chair to present this to council based on the comments tonight.
But there isn't like a separate submittal of this report to the city council in April, apart from the report that this committee through Paul gives to the city council.
Correct. Correct. The council's already accepted the Measure K report as part of the overall, along with the annual financial statements for the entire city.
All right. Okay, the next two items, I just want to, they're kind of linked. The next item is the presentation of the subcommittee.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. At our last meeting, we appointed a subcommittee of John and Debbie who met with city staff to prepare a report for us for the full committee. So we need to discuss that tonight. And then after that, we're doing things a little differently this year because in discussions with Ann and Eric, we thought we could speed up the process by not having another meeting. So ideally, we also in the packet, we have a preliminary draft of my report as the chair to council. So if all goes well, we could do these sequentially and minimize having that extra meeting that we had last year, which lasted all of about 10 minutes, I think. But that's if it goes well. If we have other questions, comments, we can take all the time we want. So having said that, on item 6, John, I'll turn it over to you and Debbie to present the work that you did. And thank you for that work because it was extensive, I know.
Great, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so Debbie and I met with Eric and his team to discuss what goes on with the different funds that are covered here, fund predominantly 107, 103, and we even looked at fund 301. We discussed that. We were provided details of each of those funds. And from there, Debbie and I went away from that meeting. We selected about 16 transactions that total 3.4 million, which represented about 50% of all expenditures, Measure K expenditures. We selected those. Eric and Ann provided details, explanations, backup documentation. Debbie and I looked at these expenditures to determine that they were in fact appropriate given what they're meant to be spent on, and that they were properly approved and appropriate. We also were able to tie out all the revenue received from the state of California without exception. And we even took another step forward and talked to Ann about her process for vetting vendors and became comfortable with that process and the frequency in which she refreshes that. So I don't need to read the whole report, right, Eric? Okay, great. Debbie, do you want to say anything?
I think that's it. And when you get on the December
December 12th meeting,
At the Measure K meeting?
the subcommittee meeting that we had.
I'm not exactly sure what date it was, but I did meet with you two.
Yeah, I think that we forgot to add that for two.
Oh.
I mean, I did actually meet with you.
Yeah.
And came over and went and answered a bunch of your questions in the conference room. I'm sorry, I don't recall the date.
Yeah, I think that was that.
Was there more than one meeting?
Yeah, so we met with them and then we picked stuff and then we came back and met.
And had questions on
Y-
the things.
yeah.
on a few of the things that we had.
I think I met with you. I'm looking at my calendar right now. If I'm lucky, it goes back. that far.
Yeah.
I think I met with you and then you emailed me a list of questions that we responded via email, if I remember correctly. After that first meeting, you asked for a bunch of backup documentation that we provided. But hold on, let me,
You were at that meeting.
On December 12th.
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, I changed my report. Yeah. Any, John more to add?
No, I think that was, I think John did a great job.
Okay, questions then for the subcommittee?
Um,
Evan, you have questions?
Yeah, what kind of stuff, I don't know, examples, what did you have second questions about? What did you need further inquiry into?
Well, so I think what we did is we looked at, I mean, it was, there's not a ton of transactions that occur within these funds, but anything that looks large, maybe hard for us to gauge, but unusual. I mean, I think about item number 10 on there. We had a good laugh over that. Crime scene
Oh.
cleaners. But if it looked like it wasn't intuitive, we selected it. And really just because we wouldn't be familiar with all the vendors that they use. And so, that's how we selected various transactions within the ledgers that they provided. We also looked at tied out the largest expenditures are the debt service payments. So that's the payments to BMO. We tied out the various statements there. So that accounted for a big percentage of the dollar value.
I mean, one example was, for example, the invoice that we had given to John and to Debbie, or the committee members, was a copy of an invoice. And to be honest, the auditors that you just saw on the screen had the original copy or was using the original copy. So we have the original copy of that now, and then we sent that on to John and Debbie to actually see it. Because they, for example, they questioned, hey, how come this one doesn't have the page stamp like all the other ones did? And then I realized, oh, wait, this is the copy of one. And then we found the auditors had it. So we then provided the original copy of that invoice.
John, I have a question for you. On Exhibit A, these are all actual expenditures that were made from the Measure K fund. But I noticed in the report that we just heard from MGO that and we've talked about this before, there are transfers made from the Measure K account to streets and roads, to
Yeah.
head bike, all those sorts of things. Did you also monitor those? Because they're not truly expenditures because they're simply moved over to a different fund for subsequent projects, as I understand it. Anna, is that correct?
So let me see if I got this here, but they provided us access to, or the details for Fund 301, 301, which is the gas tax fund. And so while that isn't necessarily a Measure K fund, a lot of our dollars go over to that bucket. And so we were provided that detailed list of transactions, and we selected things from that group.
So for example, some of these invoices that were selected are for 301 expenses and not out of Fund 103, which is normally for example, accounts for most of the debt service, or 107, which accounts for the library construction. They also pick some invoices from 301 to look at as well.
So some of these were essentially streets and roads expenditures?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Like MCK, Carrick's Engineering, I think we had, right?
So they were streets and roads
Yeah.
projects.
So Carrick's would be,
Yeah, from 12 through 16 are streets and roads.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
Did you say, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, yeah, makes sense. Look at the bigger stuff. Of these 16, did you include all the biggest ones? Are there any big ones that were just not audited for whatever reason, didn't make it onto the list?
So these were specific payments, so there could have been a second payment to
Okay.
that entity.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Carrick's Engineering got a single payment of $449,555. They may have gotten another payment.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay.
It was one for 25,000 even, right?
That was the library, though.
That was, yeah, that was under library. And that was sort of the final payment. There had been a slight holdback till
Right.
everything was
Retention,
absolutely
yeah.
completed. And then there's a technical term for this, but that's my layman's understanding.
Yeah, but we had to apply judgment and obviously, you know, the intent wasn't to audit every single transaction, but by and large, we did try to grab those that were significant or didn't intuitively make sense.
Is Bolin Sawinski Jackson, is that an individual or is that
No,
a
that's the
firm?
library contractor.
Oh, okay. Were there any payments to just individuals?
Evan, great question. And, you know, we would have been on the lookout for anything that looked unusual like that. There still could be, but we didn't notice anything that.
Okay.
Well, one good
they-
example for you would be Crime Scene Cleaners. They are an individual company. Is that what you mean? Or
No,
you
I mean like
a
Evan
person?
Daly, like a check
Yeah.
for.
Oh, very unlikely.
Yeah.
It better not be, as far as I know, right?
But you would agree that would be something you probably would have.
Yeah.
The only reason in my head, that, for example, would be a reimbursement to an employee for like, let's say they just bought a light bulb for the library. This is oversimplifying it, but in theory, that you might have seen a reimbursement in that regards, or that would be an example of one going to an individual, but that's the only thing that would come to my mind.
You know, we have small vendors that wash the windows at the library and clean the carpets. I actually, off the top of my head, don't know what the name of each of those companies are. And it could be John Smith Window Cleaning, right? As opposed to a big company, right? Like the guy that comes and cleans the windows, it's him and his son. As opposed to BCJ, who is a major developer who built our library.
Yeah, I think, John, you're kind of acknowledging what I was getting at is like, it would jump out at me if I saw somebody was getting an individual transfer of money out of the fund. And that's not something that you necessarily saw.
It didn't come to our attention. Nothing jumped off the page that gave us concern.
Yeah, great.
And we did get a copy of every single transaction. And
We did.
I love that they were changing their accounting system in the middle of this too. So we saw it all and then, and looked at all.
We used our superior Excel filtering skills to try to sift through all the data Eric gave us. It was a lot of fun.
And you could have selected any expenditures that you want.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think the number of expenditures that we selected this year is higher than in prior years. But that might also make sense as in prior years, we had large expenditures going to a limited number of vendors
Right.
because we were doing the library at that time.
Okay, any other questions or clarifications from anyone? Again, I want to thank both of you,
Yeah, thank
Debbie and John, for the work, and also staff for
Yeah.
meeting with the subcommittee.
I think
And
you
I
guys.
just had, when we asked for the backup on those 16, it was considerable. So it was
Mhm.
the invoice, when it was paid, what the approvals were, if it required that the city council had approved it.
Correct.
That
Right.
sort of thing. So it was all there.
Okay, good, excellent. All right, well, at this point, I think it would be appropriate for the full committee to approve the subcommittee's report that was just presented to you. So do I hear a motion to accept the subcommittee's report?
Yeah, motion to amend.
Oh, sorry. Prior to that, I know there is none, but public comment first.
I don't see any public comment, so
Mr. Chair, there does not appear to be any public
thank
comment.
you. Thank you, Madam Public Works Director. All right, so do I hear a vote to accept, a motion to?
Motion to accept the subcommittee report as is.
From Evan, okay, second?
I'll second.
Second from Gary, and all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, anyone opposed? And then, okay, thank you very much. So we accepted our subcommittee's report, okay. The next item then would be to review a preliminary draft of the full committee's report to the city council. And what you have in the packet is something that I drafted based on the subcommittee's report and based to a large degree on what I prepared last year in terms of the format. And I tried to explain, because I know we have a couple of 2 or 3 new council members. So the first part of my report kind of gives the history of Measure K and what we are supposed to be doing as an oversight committee. On the second page, I summarized the expenditures and the revenues for the fiscal year. It's consistent with the information from the audit. It's presented slightly differently, but it's consistent. And then the summary on the last page, I'm suggesting that we can make a positive recommendation to the city council based on 4 things. The fact that we had a presentation from city staff back in November, and we could able to ask any questions we wanted about the revenues and the expenditures. That was before the formal audit. The second thing, the subcommittee's work that we've just reviewed and accepted. Yeah, we had a chance to look at anything that we wanted from the Measure K program. The presentation of the formal audit that we've just received from MGO. And finally, this is something a little bit new this year. My understanding is the subcommittee discussed with Ann the procurement process and the contract renewal process and how staff goes about ensuring that the vendors and contractors are properly vetted and selected based on city's criteria. So my suggestion would be to city council that based on those 4 findings that we've made as a full committee, that we conclude, and this is the language in the measure, we conclude that Measure K revenues were expended, quote, efficiently and effectively during fiscal year 23-24, which is the finding that we really need to make unless we find any anomalies or discrepancies or unusual activities. So that's how I laid this out. It's preliminary draft. I'm open to any kind of comments or discussion that committee might have.
Okay. Paul, I thought it was very good. I thought it just laid out very nicely all the basis for the work that we do. At the risk of adding a little bit more detail, which already to a report which already has a fair amount of detail, I think there are a couple of things that are worth mentioning in terms of what's in that ending fund balance of the 3,682,000. There's a couple of things. The city created a $2.5 million reserve, which is to a debt service reserve to account for the risk of sales tax revenue in the future not meeting expectations or fluctuating. And there's also 150,000 reserve for future library maintenance.
Correct.
And then as part of the balance, a piece of that, it's the 165,690 restricted fund balance. I think that represents the tail end of the borrowing for library construction, which has to be used for library construction. So I wonder if it's worth just mentioning somewhere in the conclusion that the 3,682,000 includes that $2.5 million reserve and the 150 reserve for the library, plus the restricted amount of 165, so that after you back out those amounts, the ending fund balance and net of those reserve amounts, according to my arithmetic, it's 866,354. So it adds a lot more detail to the end, but I know the city council did set up the $2.5 million
Correct.
reserve. And so I think it's worthwhile just reminding the city that the reserve that they set up is in that 3,682,000.
Okay. We could put a footnote or an asterisk or something?
Like a footnote.
Yeah, footnote, asterisk or something. Or,
And I'm looking at the auditor's report on page 3. This is what you're referring to, the 165,690.
well, the 165,690, that's the restricted amount. That's the amount that has to be used for library construction.
Right.
The 150,000 reserve for future library maintenance, I know is something that is, it's discussed in the city's budget
So
document.
you may recall from the November revenue and expenditure report, in the bottom of that report, we explain the reservations that John's talking about. So all that is spelled out. It has the resolution number of what council approved, which is that correct, the $2.5 million in debt reserve, just in case. Which in theory, when the debt gets paid off in, I want to say 2032, which is what's in my head, that reserve would then can be used for anything. And technically, the council could change their mind and do something else. But right now, they put aside that $2.5 million just in case. It's $75,000 a year for future library maintenance issues. So as of year 2, it's $150,000. And fortunately, knock on wood, we haven't had to use it yet. And then finally, as you said, there's about $165,000 in bond proceeds that has to either be for library completion or if there is, the library is completely done, then I've got to use that for debt service.
So I think it's just worthwhile just reminding the city council that the 3.682 is not money that's available. A big chunk of that has already been spoken for.
And tell me again what the numbers were, just so I get this right. If I'm gonna put a footnote in, we've got 2.5 million.
2.5 million for debt service reserve. $150,000 for future library maintenance issues. And then the 160,
690.
correct, 165,690 is the,
90.
what's remaining in the bond proceeds for construction of the library.
Remaining bond proceeds.
Correct.
Would you want to go beyond, if the goal of it is to highlight the fact that this is tied up money, would you want to go beyond an asterisk and actually put like almost an editorial comment, like of this 3.6 million, the majority of it is spoken for?
And the reason,
For better or worse, just to make them aware. Hey, 'cause yeah, I look at that, 3.6 million seems like a lot of money. Like, why are you sitting on all this when we have all these deferred maintenance?
exactly. So that's why in the November report, the goal of the measure was not to just sit on $3 million in cash.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure, that we explained, no, but it's earmarked for specific things that we just went over. There's 800,000, as you just kind of said, at the end of June 30, 2024. And obviously the council did authorize some additional, use some of that money, knowing that there was about $800,000 in Measure J. Just like we did a few years ago, when we were accumulating measure money because we were worried about COVID and what that would do to sales tax. And obviously sales tax came in better. So like if we were doing this report last year, you saw we did a lot of projects last year to use up some of that measure money. Because again, the goal of it is not to sit on it, it's to use it for projects and programs and whatever the city council desires, intended purposes. But yes, we did want to make sure we explained why there's $3 million. It's not just sitting there. There are earmarks per se for some of that money.
So it's 2 million, I just added for fun, 2,815,690 is spoken for of the 3.6, right?
Sorry, I will trust that you're adding it correctly. Sorry, I don't have anything in front of me that would.
I will add a paragraph at the bottom, after that table, explaining how much of that is committed and just what we talked about. I'll just put a sentence in there that describes the debt service reserve, the remaining bond proceeds available for future construction in the library set aside. I'll draft a sentence there. I'll pass it by you, Eric, and then that will be added in here. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, I think so. I think if the point is to point at the fact that
Right.
there's not,
It's
I would add some adjectives or some language. Tied up, I think is good.
Right.
Committed.
Right.
Something like that.
Okay, I will do that. Any other comments, any clarification, errors that you see?
Just the clarification that Anne was also attending the December 12th meeting. That's on the first page, the last paragraph.
Yeah, for Ann.
The only other comment I would have, Paul, is that I remember in prior years when Jim Bonato was chairman, I mean, when he submitted this to the city council, I think he actually read his report to the city council at a city council meeting. So this is getting a little bit long to read it verbatim at a city council meeting. That was my.
I won't read it.
So
Good, okay.
just for
Great.
clarity, the council will get get his report in a memo that goes to them ahead of time. It's included in the agenda. They'll have already read the entire report. Paul is just giving his,
Yeah, I mean, last year
Review.
I summarized it. I didn't read it verbatim at all. I summarized what was in there, just kind of like I did this evening, but a bit more detail, and then asked them for any comments they might have had. And they seemed to be, actually, they seemed very happy last year that it was short presentation. Yeah, somebody said that. This is nice. It's short and to the point.
Jim's
So-
wasn't.
Yeah, I think that was the implication, I think. So I can I'll add those two suggestions. Anne was there, information about the final balance. Anything else from anyone? Okay,
So seeing no public comment, if you could just vote on the report.
keep me on the straight and narrow.
I
That's
know.
good. Okay, so do I hear an motion then for us to adopt this committee's annual report to city council, subject to the amendments you just talked about?
So moved.
Okay, Debbie moves,
Seconded.
John seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
so Paul, a little sidebar for you. You are currently on the agenda for March 17th.
Oh,
Does that day work for you?
St. Patrick's.
And if it does not, I'll have to push you. I just took it as a placeholder.
Let me have a look. I know I can't. Is it every week the council meets?
No.
And I think you have to wear green, don't you?
Yeah, probably.
And drink
March.
beer.
Yeah.
7 o'clock, is it 7?
Yes.
Yes,
starts
I
at-
can, March 17th, I can do that.
Perfect. Then I don't have to take you off the agenda. That's great.
And,
Are you, excuse me for one more second, Chair, I apologize. Are you able to get me your letter before Friday?
I mean, this amendment.
Yes.
If Eric verifies my changes, yes, I will give it to you probably tomorrow.
Perfect, because we have to upload your memo by Friday.
Okay, and you put today's date, well, I guess I'll modify this and give it to you.
We can change the date if you send it as a Word doc.
My typing skills are not terrific, so maybe.
I'll have clear proof.
someone-
I'll have clear proof it for
page
you.
Numbers on and that sort of thing would be.
I'll have clear proof it for you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I think that's, anything else we need to talk about? I think so, so thank you very much, everybody. That's, this is the main part of our work that we just approved. It's something important because when the measure was passed, the idea of having a citizens advisory review committee was central to the measure being successfully enacted. So thank you, it's significant. All right, so now we move on to item 8, and this is something I asked Anne to talk about at our meeting. Okay.
So we have, we're going to run through.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Going back to the city council meeting, I'd like anyone who wants to join, and you came with me last year, I know, but Debbie, and if you as vice chair, if you want to come to the meeting, I'd be more than happy to have you guys there, if you'd like to be part of it. It'd be great.
What time did you say it was? 7?
Starts at 7 and it's a presentation, so you'd be within the first 30 minutes, I would hope.
Okay.
Okay, all right, sorry,
Thank you.
sorry, Anne, interrupted you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So I wanted to just take this opportunity just to do a quick overview of our CIP process and our Measure K projects and how they're chosen. So you all may recall, or for the new members, you may not know, Measure K is a general sales tax. And so when the ballot went out, there were, it reads like it could be used for this, and this. But it is a general sales tax, and the city council can approve the expenditure of those funds really on whatever they want. I did take a moment with Eric to go back and actually look at the ballot when it went out. And, you know, and it talks about the library, it talks about storm drain, residential street resurfacing, bike and ped, and city facilities, you know, and other things, right? But they do talk about city facilities and bike and ped, and the last city council was very true to that. Direction to staff, complete all the residential paving. We're more than halfway through. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. We're more than halfway through doing residential paving, storm drain upgrades, as well as bike and ped. And it's not a bank account. So when we went into COVID, you know, the city council was concerned we'd broken ground in the library. They wanted to make sure with the decline in sales tax that we had enough funds to fund the library since we were under construction. Plus it's COVID. We lost a lot of staff. We couldn't get a lot of services. There was a lot of concern about contractors working in the public right of way. So we didn't do a lot of projects, right? We did mostly emergency projects. We did one street resurfacing project, one neighborhood. And so that's where you may recall last year we had the excess in Measure K funds. Sales tax came back better. And so the city council direction to us was spend that money. During COVID, we had a one-year budget. Typically we have a 2-year budget. And so we were just, you know, marching steadily along. And to your point, Evan, when you said you could just do more projects with the money, well, we can, except we also have to balance that with the amount of staff we have to actually design the project, put the project out to bid, and build the project. So I'm telling you, did you want to say something? I'm building you a clock to tell you what time it is to say, you know, we're still staying true to what our voters asked for. Going into this budget cycle, we have a very robust CIP. You all saw the presentation back in December, November? November? It was earlier this year than last year. So we have street resurfacing planned. We're going to be spending more than $15 million in, I'm not going to say Measure K funds. We're probably, about $15 million over 5 years in Measure K funds. Don't write that down because that's not exact. No, but so when we talk about our Measure K funds, the library comes first, right? So last year we had about $5.5 million. We pay the debt service. Maintenance last year at the library was coming in at about $790,000. And when I say maintenance, that includes everything. Landscape maintenance, building maintenance, all the utilities, window washing, carpet cleaning, the insurance on the building, everything that and last year's number was probably the first year we had a real number. You know, the first year that also accounts for the Monday hours. So we call them Monday hours, but they're the extra hours at the library. So being open on Monday and the extra hours during the week. And so that is a significant number, right? So then when you think about, okay, now we've taken that 3 point something million off the 5.5, there's really about $2 million left to do other projects, right? We always put $1 million into street resurfacing because we have to meet our state requirement, and the rest of the money gets split up amongst storm drain and bike and ped. We typically roll bike and ped into street resurfacing because we're usually doing our bike and ped improvements after we resurface streets. There's no sense in spending that money to put them down in a street that I know I'm coming back next year and I'm just going to rip it up. So you will usually see, so when you ask the question about the audit, about money transfers, you'll usually see bike and ped upgrades incorporated with street resurfacing per our bike and ped plan. And we prioritize our projects through a couple of different ways. For street resurfacing, we have an annual audit that's done every 2 years. They tell us the condition of all our streets and roads, and we focus our attention on streets that are worst first. This has nothing to do with Measure K. It's just how we prioritize our neighborhoods, because we know that as streets start to really decline, it costs that much more money to repair them. So we try to get them in a neighborhood by that sweet spot, right? So I'm happy to report we're more than halfway through residential paving since the inception of Measure K. Storm drains, in 2018, the city went out with a storm drain study. The consultant prioritized all of our storm drain needs, and we are actively following the list. This year, if you looked in our CIP, it'll show you the next 5 years worth of storm drain projects that are coming up. And that is based on that storm drain master plan that the city council approved in 2018. So nothing is really done in a vacuum, right? Like, we're still marching down the happy road to do all these improvements that we committed to. But on top of that, it is not a bank account. We're not supposed to be sitting on money. So at the end of the budget cycle, my staff and I report to council, hey, we're going to do all these projects. We have enough staff to do all these projects. And oh, by the way, we have X amount of dollars left. Here are some needed projects that need to be done. And so last year, and I brought this up in the November meeting, was the very first year that the council approved 2 projects that were outside bike and ped, storm drain, street resurfacing. One was the PD roof, city facility, and the other one is the city hall pond. Now, you may think, I don't know, it's the pond. But when we talk about how often that pond gets used and how many of our residents come to enjoy the pond every year, it's getting to be somewhat of a safety hazard. The walkway needs to be repaired. The fountain is dirty. You really don't want your kids sitting there putting your hands in the pond. And it is a focal point for the city. We do all of our summer concerts here. We've had Warrior Watch parties here. We have the food trucks here. We have the PD's annual night out here. You know, so it is a focal point for our residents as well. So I would argue that it also is a good use of a city facility, Measure K money, to make it a place that our residents want to come back to. This does not happen in a vacuum. It has to be approved by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission does not approve our projects, but they approve it for conformance with the general plan. But it is a public meeting. It's on the agenda, people can go, people can listen, they can hear all about it. It goes to our budget committee, which is also a public meeting. Sometimes it goes to the budget committee twice, and then it goes to council, right? So this is not something that happened in the vacuum. It was very open and transparent. I think, you went to LGA, correct? And we talked about it at LGA. I think I brought it up when I did my seat. So none of these projects are happening in a vacuum, right? We're not trying to slide stuff in. It's very transparent and very open. And this commission is going to see, as the streets and roads get better, as the bike and ped needs get less, you know, we're going to get there before the bond runs out. We're going to start using those funds for other projects in the city that need to happen. There may be recommendations that would come from the commission, but ultimately the city council makes the decision on how we're going to spend the money. And so, you know, if they say, do it on this, then that is an approved expenditure, right? And people do have the right to come to council and say, we don't want to, when I say people, the residents, right? We don't want to spend our Measure K money on that. We think this would be a better project. So there's many vehicles for them to do that. Our last sitting council, they held true, right? They believe in all the projects they committed to the residents that they were going to use Measure K for. We built the library. We're actively staffing the library, repairing the library, keeping the library open extra hours. You know, we're doing 2 storm drain projects this year, 1 maintenance project, 1 design project. We have a bike and ped project. We just went to council and asked them to let me use $1.2 million of my street resurfacing fund because we've decided we're going to pave Contra Costa Boulevard at CCB and Taylor. The resurfacing of that whole section from Viking down to Harriet and from Shirley down to CCB on Taylor was not part of the initial scope of work because when we went out to design, the pavement didn't need to be resurfaced. But now it does. And I made the recommendation to council, we pave before we put the markings down, the new bike and ped striping. I don't want to put all that bike and ped striping down if 2 years I have to go grind it up. So we have enough money in my street resurfacing budget, most of which that's sitting there is Measure K money. So that will actively be going this year into streets and roads. So we're not veering away from the commitment that we made to do all these infrastructure projects. They're viable, they're important. But we will be moving forward with, especially as the need goes less for the 3 things that we identified it for using that money for other projects. So when we come back, I don't think our next meeting is until, when we come back, then you'll see my presentation and hey, this is how we spent all the money this year, and this is how we're going to be spending all the money moving forward, right? And they will all be approved, appropriate Measure K expenditures because, you know, our council believes in them, right?
I think it's important for people to realize that that Measure K is general purpose revenue. I think it passed with a simple majority, as I recall. And so in theory, the funds can be spent on anything the city council.
Correct.
deemed appropriate, even though I think the sense for the public when it was on the ballot was that it would be, for the library, streets and roads, that bike.
Yeah.
That was certainly the sense.
Correct.
And I had questions from people in the community and also from the traffic safety committee about the fact that for the first time, it seemed that funds were being expended on items that were not clearly one of those identified expenditure categories in the measure, notwithstanding the fact that it's all it's legal and it's permitted and so forth. So I wanted Ann to talk about it because, and not that anything is being done behind the scenes, but just to explain what happened and what we might expect to see going forward.
Yeah, and our current approved 2-year CIP shows a robust storm drain, street resurfacing, bike and ped, Measure K funded programs. Going back to, we only have so much staff. There's only so much work we can do in a year. But as we move forward, and to be truthful, we had a little bit more money because of COVID. So we were able to expand our boundaries. It might not be the same moving forward. We might, going into the next budget cycle, but I've certainly not received any direction from council to change how we're moving forward. The only direction, as Eric brought up earlier, is it is not a bank account. They want us spending the money, right? We're not supposed to be, sitting on $3.8 million without any sort of real reason. So we know that the PD needs a roof, right? It's our public safety building. And I will argue, I actually had Claire put together a bunch of slides for me and then I forgot about them until right now, but of all the people that use City Hall during the year, like the amount of events we have, the amount of people that actually come here to enjoy Light Up the Night and all the other things that happen here, it's a hub for the city and we want it safe and fun and places that people want to come and enjoy City Hall.
I was curious, you had mentioned you've done about half of the street paving so far.
We have.
How far along?
Residential paving.
Residential, okay.
So okay, let me break this up. So our direction from council is all of our arterials and collectors have to have a pavement condition index above a 70. And so if anything falls below a 70, we have to stop, shift gears and take care of it because that is the network for us. In the past, before Measure K, that was a problem because mostly all we ever paved was our arterials and collectors because we did not have the funds to keep up with residential paving. So when COVID, 2 things happened in 2017, SB1, which is the extra gas tax, passed and Measure K passed. So our street resurfacing budget went from annually about $750,000 of general fund money a year, plus some gas tax money, to almost $3 million a year. Not $3 million in Measure K, but $3 million in overall street resurfacing funds. So instead of paving one neighborhood every 2 years, residential, we're now paving 2 neighborhoods or 3 every 2 years, more than doubling our efforts to pave. So we have for residential paving, and you can see this on our website if you care to look, our residential neighborhoods broken down into 24 residential paving zones. And we don't pave your street and then jump across town and do your street and then circle back to John Street because it would be super expensive to pave that way. So we pave by neighborhood. So I told you we have the street resurfacing survey happening right now. And they're going to come back to me with all this data. And we look at the neighborhood. If your street's a 50 and my street's a 52, we take the average of the neighborhood. And that is how we rank how we pave. So 0 bad, 100 amazing. And when we started this process, more than half our neighborhoods, especially our older neighborhoods, Poets Corner, Gregory Gardens, all these other neighborhoods were well below where we want to do. They almost needed a full reconstruct. Don't talk about Gregory Gardens right now. That's a thesis paper. But so we've been, I think I've paved 12 neighborhoods since 2019. We did 5 in 2019. We did 3 last year, and I think we did 3 during COVID. So, we've brought our paving condition index for residential from a 63 up to a 72. So we've gone from fair to good.
What's the timeline, like depreciation of a street after you've done a neighborhood? How long do you
Well,
expect it?
the treatment we're putting on the ground, we're striving for a 20-year road, right? So, but that's the goal, right? So right now, all the neighborhoods we have left are above a 50 average, which is really good for residential streets. So we are, if you look consistently in Contra Costa County, we are extremely fortunate to have SB1 funds and Measure K to help us bring our paving along. We have a lot of neighborhoods who aren't so fortunate, cities around us. But with that Measure K money, we also do pothole repair. We're going to be coming out with a big pothole repair project next month. We're going to spend almost $400,000 fixing residential potholes and on all our arterials and collectors. So there's other things, you know, we put that money in other places as well. We have that Complete Streets project going right now. We just transferred money out to them. But the goal is to get our streets all above a 70, and then all we do is maintenance after that. And when we get to that point, that's when we'll need less Measure K money. Then all we'll be doing is maintenance, not repair. For Gregory Gardens, real quick, since I brought it up, we're just waiting for the sewer district. They're doing their last project. We just gave them an encroachment permit. They're going to be starting, I think, March 14th over on Gladys and finish through that last section. And then we'll reschedule Gregory Gardens.
Would you say, maybe this is more nuts and bolts question, but 400,000 for pothole repair, is that 400,000 for sacks of asphalt to like smash stuff? Or is that allocating like portions of people's salary? I mean, presumably the people are working full-time already.
No,
What
no,
do you
we're
mean
going to hire a
400,000?
we're
What
going
does that
to
do?
hire a contractor.
Oh,
We
okay.
identify all the potholes that need to be repaired on our residential and arterial
Okay.
collector streets, and we have them come and fix them. So again, this is way, way in the weeds. When it rains, I have my maintenance crews go and temporarily fix potholes,
Mhm.
right? And then we hire a contractor to come in and do them permanently. We don't have the equipment or the staff to be able to go out on Contra Costa Boulevard and, you know, effectively, safely, and efficiently repairs that need to be made. So we generally hire a contractor to come in and do that.
So what percent of the commercial, or what do you call it, arterial?
Our arterials and collector streets?
Collector streets, what percent of those have been resurfaced, or how often does that happen?
Well, up till now, they've been, so last year we did Grayson Road from Taylor all the way down to Release Valley, and we did Chilpancingo from Contra Costa Boulevard all the way to the city limits. So this year I'm waiting for the data to come back to decide what streets we're going to target next. I know, for example, Oak Park needs to be resurfaced, but East Bay Mud's going to be starting a big project there, so we won't come until they finish. Right, and we do actually do that. Hey, utilities, these are the streets I'm looking to pave. If you have anything, let me know, because the city council puts a 5-year to protect our Measure K dollars, a 5-year moratorium after we pave. No cuts, right? So if they don't tell me ahead of time and we resurface, they're out for 5 years.
Okay, and then with the storm drains, what percent have you gotten through?
So during COVID, we did 1, 2, and 3, which is Patricia, Maisie, and Vivian. And then we did a big project down on Diablo View from Pleasant Hill Road down to Barnett Circle. And this year we're going to do 5. We're going to convert 5. It's under design right now. We're going to convert, and that's 6, 7, 8, and 9 in the storm drain master plan. I'd have to look in the book. That's 5 pipes, 3 on Shelley and 2 on, 2 on Shelley, 3 on Ruth that go out to the canal that all have to be removed and replaced. But we do follow that plan, right? How much money do we have? Does it need to be designed? So that project's currently under design. I don't expect it to go to construction till the summer.
Because you said you had a consultant come out and identify all.
In
of
2018, the city commissioned a consultant to come out and they did a full 20-year storm drain master plan.
Okay.
And they prioritized, and the city council approved it, the order in which we address storm drain infrastructure needs.
And how
So-
far down that list are you now?
I just said.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. We are, so back in COVID, you may recall, you probably recall, we did a huge storm drain project over on Patricia, Maisie, and Vivian. And so
What
that,
percentage of it is done is what I was.
oh, we're on number 8,
Out of,
50.
okay.
But before Measure K, it was general fund. So we were limited in the amount of money we could do for storm drain repairs. That's why Measure K was such a big, but these projects are very large and they always need a design, so they don't move quick.
Right.
I shouldn't say they don't move quick, but for street resurfacing, if I'm going to put a pothole project out, that's relatively quick in terms of construction. But a major storm drain project that requires a design, sometimes we need easements, sometimes we have to get agreements from property owners, right? That's a much longer process. A major storm drain project could take 2.5, 3 years to get through. So it's not a surprise that we're only on 8. Right.
Okay, got it.
Okay, that was very helpful.
Good, I hope so.
Any other questions?
I can't help myself. Can I do one last one? You made reference to the pond being redone and you referenced like kids being in the pond. Is it gonna stay like the way, you know, fish and turtles and stuff in it, or is it gonna be something more like kids going in or swimming in? Or
Oh,
something?
no, it'll never be a swim pond. But the current design is to separate, so again, we're getting in the weeds here, but
Yeah, sorry.
so, no. So when the pond was built, it was never a water structure. I mean, it was never a fish pond. It was designed as a water structure way back in the day. And so the way it works is there's a big pipe in the middle of the pond that sucks water into the fountain area, the pump room, and it comes down the fountain and then it comes out around the small pond. That's how it circulates and goes under some pipes under that walkway. And the water just kind of circulates like that. And the pond also provides the HVAC power for this building. And so when people started dropping fish in the pond, we lost the ability to clean the pond. No, I mean, this is actually real, right? It was never a fish pond, right? There was nothing in the pond to support fish life. We used to actually actively have guys, you know, with brushes, chlorinating, you know, because it was a water feature, you know, cleaning the tiles, cleaning everything. But people loved I love the fish. I love the turtles. And so back in the day, you used to be able to drain the pond to the storm drain, and that's not allowed anymore. And to drain it to the sewer is a much bigger project because it involves permits and all sorts of cleaning and testing. And it's not as simple as it was, you know, 50 years ago when, oh, this is a great idea. Let's drop some fish in the pond. To do it effectively and to do it right is a huge undertaking. The last time we did it was in 2010, where we actually drained the entire pond, cleaned out all the sludge, fixed the pipes, and then put water back in.
People have just randomly been putting turtles
Yes.
and fish in the pond?
Yes.
Just pranksters or?
Well,
I mean,
yes.
like, oh, wow.
So anyways, the current design, and you can look this up online, is we're going to separate the pond. We're going to have the large chlorinated pond over here. We're going to have a small koi pond on this side. We're going to keep the fountain. We're going to redo the fountain. But that way, the smaller koi pond that needs to be cleaned will be much more manageable. And the people that want to enjoy the lovely clean water, you can still see the fish, but then that side, it'll just be much more manageable.
Turtles will live on that side.
Turtles are on that side. I love the turtles. This is a true story, and it's the last thing I'm going to say about the pond. I think I've told you guys this story. When I cleaned the pond in 2010, I was out here one day, and this little boy came up to me, and he's like, "Lady, yes, can I help you?" And he's like, "Can I have my turtle back?" And I said, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got a turtle for my birthday a couple years ago, and my mother made me put it in the pond. I want it back now." And I'm like, "Yeah, we don't actually do that," right? And he was so cute. He's like, "Can I please have my turtle back now? Does your mother know you're here?" But it's a big, huge project, and it's going to be great. You know, when the whole project's done, it really is. It's going to be a focal point for the city because people love to come here, right? We love to have people here, and we want to keep having these events, right? And every year, it seems like we have a bigger ask for more and more events.
And you're also resurfacing where all the
Broken
names,
tile.
all the broken
Yes.
tile.
Yeah.
They're gonna
Yes.
Put it up on the wall instead, right?
No, I think that what we decided we're going to do with that was going to have an interactive thing on our website that if you bought a tile, you can go find out where you were.
Where you were.
Where you, like, yeah, you're going to see, you're going to have an interactive, you know, oh, this is where my tile was, some sort of website, I think is where council landed.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to let people that we can find the option come get their tile if they want it.
All right.
Can I say a quick one on the note? I know the maturity date is like June of 2032. Is there, what, I know it's kind of difficult to, you know, see in the crystal ball too much, but is there a prospect of that loan being paid off significantly in advance of 2032?
I doubt it, and the reason I say that is because the interest on that loan is 1.75% is what's in my head. I don't know if we're gonna see interest rates. I mean, the only reason we would do it sooner is if the interest rates were lower. I have a hard time believing it's going to be lower for us to refinance it to pay that off sooner.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you would want to refinance it, but I think if you had it paid off earlier, that would free up more tax money that could be used for other projects. I guess that would be my thinking.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, then thank you again for your input. Thank you for your presentations, and I declare this meeting adjourned to our next meeting, which will be sometime probably late in the fall, right? November, December. We'd start our cycle again. Okay? Thank you all. Thanks very much. Thank you.